Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. You've tuned in to America's home for conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. My pleasure to be here today. You know the routine. Thoughts, questions, feedback, adoration, and praise can all be sent to todd@toddhuffshow.com. Or if you prefer, you can text 317-210-2830. Lots of stuff in the stack of stuff today. I want to start. I try not to do this. A little bit behind the scenes here. I do a Todd Talk every day. It's a 60-second feature that's posted on the website, social media. It's carried by radio stations around the country. And I write the Todd Talk the day before it's released. And what I do is I go through the stack of stuff and I think, all right, let's find something I didn't get to today that I want to comment on and then make the Todd Talk about it. And tomorrow I'll have a new fresh batch of news to talk about. But every once in a while, what happens is I do the Todd Talk. It ruminates over the rest of that day, the rest of the night, just in the back of my mind, percolating over there. And I think, you know what, I want to talk about this in more detail than what I talked about it in the Todd Talk. And that's what I want to do today. I want to start by talking about NPR. NPR, PBS, public broadcasting, they are fighting for their federal, what they think is their federal dollars, tax dollars that are going to support public broadcasting in some way, shape, manner, or form. The CEO of PBS is a lady by the name of Katherine Maher. We've talked about her on this program in the past, probably, within the past month or so. Time flies, especially on this program where we're having a lot of fun. But she's out there complaining on Comedy Central. Jordan Klepper, Comedy Central, what's the name? The Daily Show is the name of that. He's the host of the program, and she's talking about what it means to not have tax dollars for these public broadcasting in general. And I want to talk about this. I think this is important. I think that these sorts of questions, if we're going to rein in government, we're going to have to address these sorts of things. Things that people sometimes have very strong emotions about, we're going to have to address them and deal with these things in ways that are it's necessary to reduce the size and scope of government, to reduce the federal spending the path that we've been embarking upon for decades now. And this is how we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to cut this stuff. There's going to be, right now Doge is out there, and this is in the stack of stuff as well. They've cut, according to Doge, according to Elon, in the first 100 days, they cut $200 billion in federal spending. That's, what is that? $2 billion a day that they've supposedly, reportedly cut. So, at the beginning of these cuts, everybody's more or less cheering these things on. But eventually, even though they're using what I consider the cleaver approach, the butcher block, they're chopping away at this. Eventually, you start getting into areas of spending where more and more people either have some sort of connection to it, or they are emotionally tied to it, or just want to defend it. And so we're still not anywhere near that. But PBS is one of the first places, NPR. Those are the first places that people are going to be, I shouldn't say the first, but there's people that have emotional connections, right? To Sesame Street and Big Bird and Mr. Rogers. So I want to talk about this today, my friends. Before we get started, though, I want to remind you that It's important, you know this, to take care of your heart's health. And, one of the ways to do that, the best way to do it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So it's better to proactively take care of ourselves. We all know this, but we all get busy. We all have other things vying for our attention. We can get distracted, whatever. But there's a simple way to take care of your heart as a good first preventative sort of step, and that's by taking Solti. Solti is an all-natural, clinically proven way to lower cholesterol. It's good for your heart. All you have to do is take 2 Solti soft gels a day. They're not that big. It's not like taking horse pills or anything like that. These are all natural supplements. They are safe, and they've been proven to lower folks' cholesterol, and they might do the same for you. So I take it. You can do the same. Solti.com is where you can go. SOLTEA is the website. Promo code Todd, by the way, will save you 50% off your first 3-month supply, and you will get free shipping to boot. That's Solti.com, SOLTEA, Solti.com, promo code Todd. Get you that special discount. All right, so that being said, let's talk about what I've been squaring up to talk about here today on the program. Headline here, this is at Newsbusters, newsbusters.org. Headline, NPR CEO claims they are, quote, foundational infrastructure for our country. So let's talk about this in general. Let's talk about this before I play the soundbite. And we'll of course expand upon this as we delve into this a little bit more deeply. But my first fundamental question is, why do we need, what compelling reason do we have to ask or demand or whatever the U.S. taxpayer to pay for public journalism? Why is there such a thing as public journalism? Isn't it at some degree, isn't it at some point even dangerous to have funds that are tied to a government that are then being used to fund the people that are talking about, reporting on that government? Isn't that at least something we should be mindful of? Doesn't that have the components or the parts of the recipe that could be very, very dangerous? The old phrase, follow the money. If you're following the money, how objective can you be if the people who are giving you the money are the ones that you're supposed to be holding accountable? Can we not at least acknowledge that that problem exists? That's the first part of this, the first question I have about this. But why do we need public tax dollars, federal tax dollars, to support something that has been referred to as public journalism? Especially now that the first question still stands, but on top of that, especially after having evidence that the public journalists at PBS, NPR, whatever, these folks are notoriously known to be on the left. They are members of the godless radical left. They're at least liberals. I've shared this on this program. This came up during her testimony, Katherine Maher's testimony before the House committee. She admitted that, I don't know if she had the numbers or one of the congressmen did, maybe it was Jim Jordan, 87 members on her editorial board. All 87 of them are Democrats. We just talked about this on this program recently. It came up in passing, but the statistical likelihood that by chance the next 87 people to want to join your editorial board are Democrats, that you admitted to join your editorial board are Democrats, is statistically impossible. Well, just think about it this way. You've got the odds of flipping heads or tails on a quarter, right? There's two primary political parties in this country, Republican and Democrats. And if you flip a coin one time, it's a 50% chance that there is going to be a head or a tail. So it could be Democrat or Republican in this analogy. But to get it subsequently, time and time and time again, the same thing, the odds for that become infinitesimally larger, or smaller, I should say, to attain. It becomes dramatically more difficult to get the same thing over and over and over again. There's actually a mathematical equation. I don't have the time to compute it here to do 87 consecutive, but there's a math. It's not complicated math. You just continue to multiply, and the odds become virtually impossible to achieve. But that's what happened at NPR. So why is it that way? Why is it that way? We're left with the realization, that they are attracting others that are like them. Birds of a feather flock together. And so when you have a group that is pushing in the same direction as the Democrats, just like Freedom Marketplace here, we have a place where you can go at freedommarketplace.net. It's a place where you can go to find businesses that are pushing in the same direction that you are. They believe in America first. They believe in these concepts of liberty and free speech and all this sort of fundamentally important things to being a free citizen and being an American. They're pushing in the same direction that we are. And so we established freedommarketplace.net as a place where people could go to support businesses that are not fighting for causes that the rest of us are fighting against, right? And it's in the similar fashion. It's in a similar fashion that NPR has a group of people that want to be involved in it because who are leftist, who are at least Democrats, because that's the direction NPR is pushing. This is not complicated to understand. Third here, we're going through reasons why just fundamentally this idea of public journalism, especially when we have evidence that the public journalists are partisan hacks, at least at times, it's a problem. We don't need to be supporting this with public taxpayer dollars. Why are we even thinking this is a necessary thing? I mean, there are journalists everywhere. I would say throughout America's history, there has never been a time when more people, more average, everyday people could become a journalist on the spot. If you have a cell phone, if you have access to the internet, you can post videos. There's people who do this. There's people who are First Amendment auditors. First Amendment auditors go typically to city halls or places like that, and they walk around the building filming things and so forth, trying to see if someone stops them and says, "Hey, what are you doing? Can I help you? You're not allowed to film us." To which the auditor typically responds, "I don't need anything. I'm just doing a story. I'm documenting something that's going on in City Hall or whatever. I'm just staying in the publicly accessible areas," that sort of thing. And they have every legal right to do that. Now, these city workers will often point to a poster on the wall or some rule or ordinance that says you can't have a video camera on these premises. Now, you can't go into public offices. You can't, places that have doors that are set aside for private meetings or workspaces. You cannot go in there. But if it's a publicly accessible space, you have every right to record that. Now, people might think that's strange or weird or whatever, that you're trying to start a problem or what have you. But the bottom line is this is important in our liberties, in our freedoms. We have to be able. Citizens can be journalists. In fact, you'll see, I've watched several of these videos where some of these folks, the cops will get called. And sometimes the cops will get called and they'll kick these people out of a publicly accessible area. And they often get sued. Sometimes there's payments that are having to be made because the town did not follow the Constitution. You can't take away someone's constitutional rights to film in public publicly accessible areas. And that means that we are all effectively journalists. In fact, one of the questions that an officer or even a city worker will ask these auditors, and listen, I'm not here to defend the auditors or attack them. I'm just telling you right now what's going on if you've not seen any of those. But one of the questions that's often asked, or at least sometimes asked, is, do you have your journalist credentials? To which the reply is usually, there's no such thing. What do you mean a journalist credentials? What do I need to demonstrate that I'm a journalist? I am reporting, I am doing a story, whether I'm putting this on my personal blog or I'm posting this at CNN.com, doesn't change the fact that I am putting out a story for public consumption on what is happening in my city hall or what have you, my local police department, my town, my school, whatever. And so this causes problems to erupt, and we can go through all of that. But the bottom line is there's never been a time for more potential journalists to be out there. In fact, you can look at how the White House has shaken this up. Some people don't like what the White House has done. Some people think that they shouldn't be giving seats in the White House press corps to people who are bloggers or have a podcast or who are not part of the legacy media. But I say, why? Who says that they have to acknowledge the same media sources that have been acknowledged throughout time? Those folks at one point in history were not the ones that were in the press corps anyway. What makes them think that they are entitled? What makes them think that they should automatically have a seat at the table? Well, Todd, that's because Trump doesn't want any negative media coverage. My friends, Trump has more negative media coverage than any president living or dead could get. I think Trump is looking to give access to people who aren't there to simply try to attack and malign the administration, to simply report what's going on. Now, you can disagree with this, but the bottom line is what this indicates is that there are more journalists today, or potential journalists today, more outlets today, more sources today than ever before. So why are we needing to put money into NPR, taxpayer-funded operation? In fact, if they were so good at what they were doing, why wouldn't they simply be able to survive on their own? Why do they need to take hardworking American tax dollars to support their enterprise? So that's kind of what she's addressing here. She, Katherine Maher, CEO of NPR, she is telling Jordan Klepper of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, of all places, just how important NPR is, public broadcasting, that sort of thing. That being said, here is her response as to why this is an important thing.
I mean, it's NPR, PBS is often it's part of the conversation. I think there's been a lot of push for many, many years to take funding away. But in 2025, the criticism from the right is what do 2025, the criticism from the right is what do we need public funds to go towards NPR for? What is that argument? People are getting their news from all sorts of people. Most people just get their news from the TikTok feed from their neighbor. So why do they need their taxes to go to a place like NPR?
Well, there's also a very big difference between disseminating the news and gathering the news. And what we do is we do news gathering. It allows for people to then be able to come in and add their spin and their commentary on it. So I have no problem with TikTok influencers or other people resharing that news. I think that that's actually great. But we want them to have credible sources of news to begin with, to be able to base that work on.
Sorry, had my mic muted there. She says that there's a difference between news gatherers and folks who disseminate the news, which she's right on this. And that's, by the way, I talk about this and I don't use that terminology, but I talk about that on this program regularly. I'm not a news source. I'm not a journalist. I'm not out there trying to break stories. I'm not out there trying to uncover the news of the day. I'm not out there trying to do what a journalist does. In fact, journalists are trying to do what I do. Journalists are trying to not report on what happens. Journalists want you to have a specific conclusion after watching their piece or listening to their podcast or whatever, reading their blog, reading their article. They want you to come to a conclusion, a certain conclusion, and that's not journalism. I've been through this. But she's right in saying that there are people who are gathering the news and people who are then disseminating the news and people who are talking about the news. I talk about the news. I'm a commentator. I'm someone who tells you what I think. Do not confuse me with a journalist. That is not what I do. That is not what I want to do. I don't aspire to do that. I never have. There used to be a guy I played football with in high school. Funny guy. We asked him a question one time, and his response was, never have, never will, never have. So I've never have been a journalist. I never want to aspire to be a journalist, and I never have wanted to be a journalist, to summarize his response there back in the days of high school. But the point here is that the question is, why do we need publicly paid people to disseminate or to gather this information? Why? And not only that, she used a phrase here that is actually pretty important. She said that she wants people that are trustworthy sources. Well, with all due respect, Ms. Maher, in my opinion, your folks are not trustworthy sources. Your folks are commentators for the left. Your folks are people who are pushing the narrative in a particular direction. Your folks there at NPR, the folks at PBS, there's a lot of anti-Trump haters. They're Democrats. We've gone through this. This is who these folks are. They are not unbiased. They are not, in my opinion, fair presenters of the news. They have an axe to grind. They want people to come to a certain conclusion. That's what they're doing. Now, that being said, getting to the end of this, the first hour, I want to remind you, though, last chance here, last call. If you want to be a lifetime member of the Inner Circle, you can do that by going to toddfshow.com/join. Bonus content. This isn't launched yet. You'll be a founding member. It's going to launch a little bit later. There will be other ways to join this, but this is the last time you'll have the opportunity to become a member for life. One-time $99 investment. You're in for life. toddhuffshow.com/join if you're interested in that. toddhuffshow.com/join. I'm taking the time out, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Here we go, segment 2 of the first hour of today's program. I want to continue talking about Katherine Maher, CEO of NPR. She started by she's defending why they need public dollars, taxpayer dollars for NPR, PBS, public broadcasting. They need this, she says, for the local guy, for the local station. I've got some thoughts about this that I want to share here in a bit, my friends, but I want to play the rest of this clip of her speaking with Jordan Klepper of The Daily Show, Comedy Central. She's on a comedy show here, comedy news show where they make fun of Trump all day. By the way, 92% negative coverage of Trump in the media here in his second term. About the same as it was in his first term. Anyway, she's explaining why tax dollars are needed. And she said there's a difference between people who disseminate the news and people who gather or collect the news. I agree with that. That's indisputable. The question is, why aren't there more people involved in actually doing that job? They've got the tools, they've got the resources, they've got the credentials, if to whatever degree that's needed. They're called a journalist, right? They're called a journalist on these big networks. They're not. Some of them are publicly funded, some of them are not, but they all have the same ideology, which is that of the radical left. And they are not being real journalists. They are being people who are advancing their beliefs, their agenda. They are not trying to present both sides of a story all sides of a story. They are trying to get people to come to a certain conclusion. That is not journalism. 100%, that is not journalism. So she's talking here, Katherine Maher, she's talking here about having trustworthy, reliable sources gathering the information. And see, that's the problem. We don't trust you, Katherine Maher. We don't trust your alleged so-called reporters. We definitely don't trust people in the legacy mainstream news media. We've watched them operate for a long time. They have violated our trust. They've not just my trust, they've violated the trust of the vast majority of Americans. People do not trust these knuckleheads. And they act like, the people in the media act like, paid for by, well, private dollars or public dollars, they act like they're the victims here. You're not the victims. Do your job, earn the respect, do the hard work to regain the trust of the American people, and don't ask us to pay for it. That's basically what my message is to you. But she continues here, Katherine Maher, trying to explain why federal tax dollars are needed for NPR, PBS, public broadcasting, all that. She continues here.
More importantly, I think the big misconception is that this money goes to NPR or to PBS. The reality is that the vast majority of funds in public broadcasting resources go directly to local stations. We cover 99.7% of the country with our broadcast coverage, and that allows for Americans to have access to news even in places where news deserts are growing, where disasters happen. That's what your federal funds go to. They go to your local station, they go to your local reporters.
So what does that look like?
All right, so free. So she's making it sound like, look, this isn't going to the big wigs at NPR and PBS. This is going to your little stations out there. These little stations out in the middle of media deserts where people can't get any information. These people wouldn't know what to do if NPR and PBS weren't there, funded by you, bringing them news. They wouldn't know what was going on. They wouldn't know what to turn to the government to and ask the government to save them from. They wouldn't know what to be upset with President Trump about at any particular moment if we were not out there. Those are my words, not hers, but that's my interpretation based upon what I see them doing at NPR, PBS, and the rest. So she's saying these are going to the little stations. These are going to the individual stations. Now let me say a word about this, because I believe I am uniquely qualified to talk about this aspect of this. As a guy, now I want to be careful here. May everything that I say after these words be seen through this lens that I'm going to say here off the top. To whatever degree we've succeeded at growing this show, to God be the glory. None of what I'm about to say is meant to give us any sort of praise. I'm simply trying to give you the facts and to say that just because Katherine Maher is making buku dollars running NPR doesn't mean that, from her comfy little lounge and executive office, it doesn't mean that struggles for people who are in smaller communities or people who are starting from the ground up or whatever don't exist. So I'm going to tell you, we started nearly 10 years ago in a bedroom closet with a digital microphone, with a MacBook, actually probably was just a MacBook Air at the time, and that's it. A cell phone, we didn't record it by video. Some podcasting tech, but we used a digital microphone, and we started in the closet. Now, by the grace of God, we've gotten some traction and some favor, and we've grown. We've got stations and advertisers and listeners and all of that. But we started from there. I didn't need to go to the federal government to say, hey, fund my operation. I need to get federal dollars every year, because I'm going to tell you right now, whatever the size and operational capacity of these little stations that she says is in the middle of these media deserts or whatever she's calling it, it wasn't smaller than our operation here. So what is she saying? First of all, I would say cut your salary, hotshot, and maybe give a little bit more money to these places that are struggling. But you notice they always do this. They always do this. I remember when I was on the school board. This might step on some toes, and I hope it doesn't, but it is what it is. I remember when I was on the school board for the first time, and we had to riff. We had to reduce a reduction in force for our teachers. And I remember kind of watching and just thinking about this as we cut a couple of teachers' spots. You know, the teachers union would tell teachers, hey, we're all in this together. We got to stand up against the evil school board who's trying to take advantage of us, or whatever else they would tell people. Listen, there were good people in the union. I'm using a little bit of hyperbole here, but there were people who thought that as well. And I remember when those teachers were being cut, I remember thinking to myself, if that was really true, if this was a union of people together to protect everyone's jobs collectively, wouldn't they come together and say, look, to keep Susie or Jimmy or whoever, let's all take a 1% pay cut and reallocate the funds. I mean, that's how it's used the other way around. We'll use funds from a collective pool to protect folks from being fired for other reasons. But if there's a reduction in force, or it's how they negotiate salaries, right? I've been here longer than you. I make more than you. Why? Are you better than me? I can't talk in terms like that. But the point here is that I watched this stuff unfold, and you realize that some of this is just for optics. Some of this is just for when certain circumstances arise. The people at the top are happy to bring the people at the bottom, just in the structure of the organization. I don't mean this in some sort of a value of a human being perspective, but they're happy to use the people on the bottom rungs of the ladder if it helps them continue to get ahead and get their annual pay increase at 2 or whatever percent a year. But when it's time to circle the wagons and take cuts collectively for the group to make sure no one in the group is left out, where are they? I would ask, has she taken a pay cut? Is she doing that? Listen, I know that at some level, that's not going to fix the problem. But I'm saying, as a leader, as someone who's out here asking us for our dollars or demanding that we pay for this stuff, why doesn't she start with herself? I'm pretty sure that she could survive on less of a salary. If she's doing this for the people, if she's there worried about these communities, what is her contribution? That's my first question to all of this. And secondly, I would say where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that as somebody who has walked the road that my wife and I have walked with this, starting this in the closet, taking some bumps and bruises along the way, making some mistakes, sometimes with zeros attached to them, dollar-wise, I think I'm uniquely positioned to speak to this specific industry and say, suck it up, Katherine Maher, find a way. And by the way, as I said in the Todd Talk today, if this is such a necessary component of journalism, if this is so important and the American people are clamoring for this, then compete. Compete like the rest of us. Compete like the rest of us. Go out there and don't demand the tax dollars of hardworking American citizens be siphoned off of what they earn to support their families, what they've earned to support their children, build their local communities, whatever they're doing. Don't demand that they take that money and give it to you. Go out there and compete. Put on your big girl pants and get to work. I got to take a time out, though, my friends. Sit tight. You're listening here to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter at any of this. I'm just asking the questions. I think they're more than fair questions to ask. Timeout's in order, though, my friends. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. All right, final segment of this, the first hour of today's program. I want to play the remaining parts of this conversation, or this clip. It's about another minute or so. Katherine Maher of NPR, CEO there. Jordan Klepper of Comedy Central's The Daily Show, doing his level best here to help protect the resources of NPR, which come from you, the American taxpayer. So here is the final part of this particular clip of Katherine Maher trying to explain why it's necessary for the government to fund NPR, PBS, and public broadcasting.
The threat right now is they take $1 billion away from NPR, PBS over the next couple of years, correct?
Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NPR, PBS, and all of public media.
What does that look like? If that goes through, if they take $1 billion away,
and I hope they do.
Happens?
It's not great. I think that Americans need to be aware that it is going to be harmful to the system, right? So a lot of us probably grew up on kids television, PBS Kids. It is a crown jewel of American public broadcasting programming. And whether you think about, your history with Mr. Rogers, whether you're thinking about Sesame Street, whether you're thinking about more contemporary programming, that is so important, and that is under threat. When you think about your local radio stations, those may not be able to provide the same sorts of services. And the first thing that's going to go, I have to tell you, is going to be local reporters' jobs.
Yeah, because she wants to keep her big, cushy payroll job and the other execs at these places. She doesn't want to get to work. She wants to lobby Congress. She wants to lobby people in Washington, D.C., asking for, demanding taxpayer dollars instead of going out there and earning it like the rest of us in this business. It's amazing. Notice what they do. Notice what she does, but this is a common tactic. People who are defending taxpayer dollars being used, they always start with these stories that seem to resonate. You want to lose Big Bird? You want to lose something like Mr. Rogers? You remember watching Mr. Rogers when you were a kid? You want future generations to not have that opportunity? Well, how about this? Can you conceive of any other way, Ms. Maher, that those programs could be salvaged while the rest of the things that we're funding on the taxpayer dime get cut? See, these things are not inextricably linked. They don't require all of the funding to operate Big Bird, Sesame Street, whatever the other character's names, Elmo. Is Elmo Sesame Street? I don't even know. Oz says yes. Big Bird is. I remember that. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? I mean, are there no other ways? The only way that you can see Big Bird and Sesame Street or programs that are similar to what we would have grown up with in the past, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, reminds me of Michael Scott at The Office. Don't want to get into that, but I'm always reminded of Seinfeld or The Office. But This is the things are not inextricably linked. You can still have Sesame Street. You can still have whatever other programs you have. It's $1 billion. Don't act like you're entitled to it. Go out there and earn it. Don't throw up your hands and quit. Don't act like there's no other way to come up with it. Don't act like there's no other solution. This is crazy talk. This is absolutely crazy talk. It would be like if you were, let's say you're someone that has multiple sources of income, right? You have a job. Heck, in today's economy, maybe you have a second job. We're still recovering from the mess created by the past 4 years. And maybe you even sell some stuff on eBay or whatever, right? You've got another channel. It would be like saying, I've got to cut that tertiary source of income, that channel on eBay that I use. I'm not going to have that anymore because the money, but if I do that, the money that I bring in every month feed my kids. Well, is that where you're going to start? Is that the first thing you're going to cut? Is shelter and food for your children? Is that where you're going to start? Or are you going to start with some of the Netflix account or the extravagant, maybe you just dial back the vacation. I don't know. Maybe you don't go on a vacation a year. Whatever the case may be. But these things, it's not all or nothing. Your family doesn't cease to eat because you lose a portion of your income. This is preposterous. This is, again, just drama trying to pull at heartstrings of people to say, yes, let's support public media because I watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood back in the 1980s or whatever. She continues, though.
We have news deserts. 20% of Americans live in a place where they have no local news coverage other than public radio. We know that the existence of local news, and public radio in particular, contributes to lower rates of polarization, higher rates of civic engagement, and higher rates of civic trust. This is foundational infrastructure for our country. Even when we disagree, this is the sort of thing that can start to heal some of those disagreements and bring us back together.
So NPR is healing Americans. NPR public broadcasting is healing Americans because they take away the polarization. They take away the things that cause people to fight in local communities. I don't believe that this is true. I don't care what source she cites. I think that what upsets people as much as anything is being lied to by media. I think what upsets people as much as anything is being told one side of a story, not being told the complete picture, and then they are pressured or bullied or just criticized, ridiculed if they don't fall in line with the narrative. NPR, PBS, they are not the savior of the media world. They should not be publicly funded. I'm out of time. I gotta go. STG.